Demonstration of how to use Ravel using the database that the Our World in Data program maintains on COVID-19. So I'll just launch the current beta of Ravel. Hopefully by Sunday, when we release the full version, there'll be a more again, further improvement in the program. So you have to start a rather kludgy bit. As I said, this is a pre-beta in many ways. It's what they call alpha software. We don't have a dedicated import widget right now, so we've double-purposed what we call a parameter. So you need to define a parameter first of all, and I'll just call this OWID. And we use a bit of fancy formatting from what's called latex mathematical processing language. So that will now create a subscript to the word COVID down the bottom there, just to make it it's all as easy if you can do a bit of formatting, which isn't possible in most programs of this nature. Now we choose import CSV. You could do it from an URL, but at the moment that's not working, so I'm going to go for a file instead. So I've already downloaded the COVID database to, where are we? Great, not turning up in my quick access. This one. Okay, so that's the COVID database. Just to give you a look at it before we bring it in. It's basically as CSV or comma separated value files are. It's a list of a header and all those various data elements are loaded in, and then the country code, the continent the country is on, the full name of the country, the date of the record, and then information for each of those fields across all those dates. So click on OK. This is the import window. It's often a bit too narrow. I've got a very large screen here that gives me 4,000 by 2,000 pixels, which is quite useful. I know that I haven't got anything quite that large, but you just drag it out a bit here and see what's, whoa, which going there, what's happened there. I let go of the mouse and it's actually a separate window. That's all that happened there. So that's these are the data files. So what Minsky is now doing, Ravel, pardon me, Ravel's built on top of Minsky, and this is a feature of Minsky, so pardon me when I make a bit of a slip like that. So it's interpreting the first four elements as actual data columns of some description, and then this is data stored horizontally, which is quite a common format for CSV files. So this is all the information for Afghanistan on this particular date. And if you want to see the date more clearly, just make the column width wider. This is the width in pixels, so you can now see what's coming in. So AFG, which is the code for Afghanistan, it's on Asia. Of course, that's repeated in every record. The date, starting back on the 24th of February 2020 for Afghanistan, and then how many cases they have, how many new cases. Of course, there are one new case, total cases, one new case, so that remains at one right down till here, of course. New cases, and that's a smoothing technique, and then total cases as a percentage of population, blah, blah, blah. So you want to bring that in, and here comes the first thing. There's no point bringing in both the country code and the country. So because I want this to be more readable, I'll bring in the country name rather than the code. So you just click on this checker and that check mark, and that dimension is not imported and it turns red. At some point we're going to offer what used to be called conjoint dimensions in PC Express, which is the inspiration for this whole approach to handling data. A program built by MIT back in the 80s, which I got to know back then, was then bought by Oracle. Oracle actually shut it down sometime in the early 2010s, which I think is a great pity. But this is we've done the same thing with a totally different data engine, and of course a graphical user interface that Oracle never dreamt up itself. So when we do that with a conjoint dimension, if I choose Asia, then only countries in Asia will turn up over here. We haven't done that yet, so I just won't bring in the continent. It's a repetitive thing we don't need. So I'm now going to import the country, and that's called location. I can click in the window here, and then you get another little pop-up window here. And so I just change that to country. And then date, that'll do. And now a format. Now here's one of the bugs we haven't yet got rid of. Hopefully it'll be gone by Sunday, but you never know. Click in that format window and you get a little pop-up, and then you've got a choice, a set of standard templates of different dates. And this is year, month, day, which is this one here. Now here comes the bug. Boom, can't recall no such variable. It might or might not be fixed up by the time Sunday comes around. Click on OK there, and if you've got lucky, you think, what the hell's happened? Well, the import window is sitting up there. It's just created that format string now, the percentage Y, which says it's the string for the year, and then percentage M for the month, percentage D for the day. And the fact that the lowercase m and lowercase d mean people can either type 2 as a month or 02 as a month, and the program interprets it correctly. Ditto, the date can be shown as 05 or 5, and the program interprets it correctly. Press the enter key. Now again, you're staring at something blank. Well, there it is. And now we've entered the data string to say interpret the dates in that fashion. Ravel probably would have done it correctly itself anyway, but that's just being a bit extra cautious. Now here are all the columns you want to import, and there's total cases, new cases, blah, 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 blah. So they're all going to turn up on one single dimension, and since they're variables about COVID, I'll just call them variables. Now, and they're all, there's strings in terms of, yes, the number's numeric, but the actual names are strings. Neither numbers nor dates, so it's this you look at to see whether it's a string or not, the actual label, rather than the data, which of course is always numeric, and sometimes those numbers represent dates. Click on import, and you wait a few seconds, because it's a 15 megabyte file. Saminsky's dragging that, Ravel is dragging that into its multidimensional data format. And you might have to wait a bit longer on your machine because I've got an i9 here, but we'll see. And now, ta-da, we bring in a Ravel, which starts as just a simple box. And the way everything works in Ravel and Minsky is you define objects by wiring them together. So if I click, notice if I click here, I get to move the object on the canvas. If I click on the circle, an arrow comes out. And the arrows are fairly intelligent, so if you pull it out to here, which is just in the general direction of the Ravel, and release the mouse, it'll click to the entry port on the Ravel itself. Now, there's one more bug, which doesn't turn up the first time you bring in an object, but it does the second time. When I hit the recalculate button up here, then it instantly recalculates and shows me for that first Ravel, but it doesn't do it for subsequent ones. So let's now start taking a look at it. You bring a plot in, and click on the plot. The plots themselves have got 4 inputs on the left y-axis, 4 inputs on the right y-axis, and 8 potential inputs on the x-axis. That's if you want to plot one thing against another. If you don't put anything on the bottom axis, you get the horizontal axis here showing up. So now if I just drag this out to here and do the same story, let go, it'll link up with the graph. And now you see the little arrows here, they let you expand the size of a graph, so let's make it a bit larger. These ones here control how large things are. That's the default size, and that's fill the entire screen. So since I'm starting off at the first time, I'll stick with filling the entire screen. Now when these elements come in, they're not actually sorted necessarily, so we make very heavy use of the right mouse button. So if I right click here, I can go to Axis Properties and Sort, and say Sort Dates Forward. Maybe one of these days we'll fix that up, but we haven't done it yet. Equally for country, Axis Properties, Sort Forward. So they're now going to be an alphabetical order by country. And then variables, right click, hang on, get a bit further up here. Okay. Probably a double click there without meaning to. Okay, Axis Properties, Sort Forward. So now countries, dates, and the variables are all going to be in date order. Now at the moment, that's just what Ravel is doing, is dumping everything into that window, because all the selectors are inside the central dot here. That's actually the entire database. So that's something like 200 countries by about 400 days by about 50 variables, and it does the best it can in pulling all that information in. But if you move the dot, and I'll move this out to past all the ones that are fairly, well, new cases per million. And let's start with total cases per million, which is up here. Now I'm doing this just by using the mouse, as you can see, but to make it possible to do things faster, we also use the arrow keys. You press the up arrow key, you go up in the direction, and there's total cases. If you press the down arrow key, you go backwards in the along that axis. So I'm going to go up to total cases per million, which is here, and then I want to show this by date. So flip this around here, just flip the axis, and now the data is by times. You see January, February, April, blah, blah, blah over there. I'll just make this graph a bit larger, drag it out a bit. That's too many countries, of course, because if I now go forward on the country axis to the first country, and by the way, here's another little bug, press the up arrow, we go to Africa. In fact, the first entry is Afghanistan. So at the moment, the mouse would take you there, but the arrow key jumps over the first entry to the second. Again, we'll fix that in a later release of the program. Now, continue to press the up arrow key. There's Africa, there's Albania, Algeria, Andorra, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to show the countries which I was looking at to live in during the coronavirus crisis, because courtesy of Patreon, and again, a huge thanks to my supporters on Patreon, I could choose to live anywhere on the planet during this crisis, and the best ones to choose were ones where either I was a citizen or my partner was, my wife was a citizen, and that left, or I was a resident in some sense. But there are 4 countries: Australia, where I'm born and bred, and I still have an Australian passport. The Netherlands, where we bought a house together about 2 years ago. The UK, where I have a residence permit until 2022. And then Thailand, where we are now, where my wife is a citizen. So let's just now make a choice of just those 4 countries. So if I right-click here, Access Properties, I get pick slices, being slices of the data. At the moment, all the data, all the countries are clear, which is about 200. So let's just narrow it down. If I hold the Control key down and click on Australia, click on Australia without the Control key, and that sets Australia alone and leaves all the others out. Now to add the others, I've got to continue holding the Control key when I click again. So I'll come down here and click on, actually let's click on China first of all, because it's worth having China as a comparison, there being the country in which the virus first originated. So China, then we take a look at way down here, the Netherlands. Then Thailand, and finally Australia. Oh, sorry, finally the United Kingdom. Where are we? Okay, now at the later stage of the program, what will then happen is those 5 countries will appear on the left-hand side of the arrow you can see there. At the moment, what it now means is I move the down arrow, because I'm now going backwards in alphabetical order, then I just see the countries that I've chosen in that point. If I now go back inside the circle, then I see all 5. And one of the weaknesses of the program at the moment is how we display the legends. So I'll bring up the legends. It doesn't look very good, and we're going to do something about it, but at the moment it works. So you come to Options, and this is where you provide a label for your chart. So this is total cases per million by date, and the y-axis is cases per million, and then I want the legend, and click on OK. Now that's a bit large, so I'll try to reduce it in size, and here's where I have all sorts of fun, because I'm trying, there we go, I got it. So I'm just reducing the size of that, and I want to move it a bit over there, and for the life of me I can't get it to go. So this is one, whoops, I should be able to select that, but it just doesn't happen. So as I said, this is one reason that it's alpha software rather than beta software. So there we have the data. Let's now make it look a bit better. So I'll just actually change the pen styles so that I have, pardon me, larger, deeper lines. I don't want to get the color there. Okay, great, okay, and then color name back again. So they make it 3 pixels wide rather than 1 pixel wide. Okay, so we do that. Click on OK, and then the lines are a bit wider. Now you can tell straight away the Netherlands is in a bad way, and so is the United Kingdom. But I made my decision to leave those countries way back here, when of course you can barely even see the data down there. So what this means here, 1E4, then that's 10,000. So this is saying 70,000 cases per million, which is 7% of the population, or more than 7%, has the virus right now, recorded as having the virus. In the Netherlands, just over 6% in the UK. You can see the impact of the successful vaccination campaign in the UK, which is the only thing they've done successfully. Australia and Thailand are way down here, and in China even lower. You can barely even see them. So how do we handle that? Let's go back to full scale, and then I'll just drag this down a bit. And it's worth having that chart for the entire time period, but I can create another Ravel and link that to the data as well. Now, will it recalculate? Yes, it does. Okay, same story, so let's just make this, sort that by variable, sort this by country, sort this by date, turn this around so the date is that way in the country. And I just want to just lock onto the same countries, but let the variables and make the variables the same and the countries the same, but have the dates different. So if I select them both and do a right click in an open space here, I get lock selected Ravels. And that then means that these two are in lockstep. So if you can now see this has moved to total cases per million. The countries down here are the same 5 that I've got up there, etc., etc. Notice I jumped the 2 initially. But what I want to do is make date different. So if I again right click here, and we're going to make this better in future, but the handles have to have the same names, which is easy here because it's coming out of the same data set. But if you wanted to combine OECD data on unemployment with Bank of International Settlement data on credit, then you'd have potentially different names for the different dimensions. So I'm just going to make country and variable the same but date different, so do that okay there. So now I can now touch another chart down here, make that a bit larger. And what I want to do is, whoa, no, we curve our lines here, and at the moment that's my mouse that's causing trouble. It double clicks on me, and making a curve when I don't actually want to do that. So let's just go back to the full scale again. And then what I want to add here is what we call a caliper. And at some point we're going to have more than one. This lets you choose a specific subset of the data. So I want to look just at the data for the very early period and say between January and when I decided to get the hell out of the Netherlands and the UK. And now you can see rather more clearly the differences between the countries at that early stage. I'll put the legend in here as well. Same story, total cases per million by date, and then cases per million. I don't have to do this, of course, but it just looks more consistent. Okay, and then just make, now here we go, I'm trying to go, here we go. Now I've finished what I couldn't do up the top there. And notice, by the way, the top one has gone down to a single point because this early on, only China has the information in it. And that's converted itself to a bar chart. It shouldn't have happened. I'll turn it back to a line chart, which is what I want there. And why have the dates? Here we go. Have I found a bug when I don't want to find one? Let's just go forward a bit in time, or in country. Let's go take a look at the countries. Okay, so there's total cases per million, as I want. Right, okay. Sometimes little things happen like that. I'll show this to Russell and he can work out what actually led that to happening. Again, this is why it's still in the development stage here. So there's total cases per million over the entire time period. Now this hasn't yet clicked in as I want it to. So, and I've also, you see, date's in the wrong axis. Date needs to be around here. So let's flip this around this way. And that's what happened over here. Date got changed. Okay. So that's by date, and this one is down here by country. Let's just make them, oh, well that's cute. Okay. That's a clash of the two types of selections. So that's knackered me up nicely. Okay, so what have I got to do here? Let's go and turn off the lock specific handles. So I'll lock country, I'll lock variables only. Let's just do that. And let's see what happens there. But at the moment we're locking the direction of the axes as well. Now I want them both, date to be both in the same way. All right, that works. And now I can do the comparison between the two. So let's go pen styles again and make that a bit, make the lines the same width on both charts. Okay, and the period I was really looking at began about the end of February. And you can see what's happened already. China's flatlining completely. Its suppression program, I'll just go back a bit and just take a look a bit earlier again. Selecting these is a bit tricky right now. Let's go, that's the end of January. So you can see that really by early February, China had already completely suppressed the outbreak. We all know the program it used it, which is pretty brutal. Literally welding doors blocked in some apartment blocks to stop people getting out. But this is what I was looking at, and I was actually in Australia at this particular time, visiting my family and working with Russell on both Minsky and Ravel. And what I was watching, which I found was quite mysterious, was that there was no data at all for cases in the Netherlands. You look here at the Netherlands, the green line starts here. Now, so in this case, it's probably better to go across to a dart, to flip this axis around so I see it by country. And then just to look at a single date. So we now drag the mouse here. Okay, now we're seeing it just by a range. And I can actually turn the calipers off here. Let's see if I can expand the range a bit. Okay. So let's see, axis properties, toggle the calipers, just get rid of them. So now I can go through dates just by pressing the up and down arrow key. Let's go back a bit further. Let's go back to 3rd week of February. So at this stage, if you were making a decision where to live amongst those countries, you'd got the Netherlands. Look at that, no cases at all, which is what had me worried, because living in Amsterdam, one thing you know, there are lots of tourists. In fact, Amsterdam is the top tourist destination in Europe. So the whole thought that there were no cases in the Netherlands, whereas there were some in the UK, just didn't make sense to me. So I just go forward, and I was watching this data every day, not using Ravel at this stage because it wasn't so solid enough, but looking at the Johns Hopkins University database. So 24th, nothing, 25th, nothing, 26th, and here we go. The Netherlands finally records its first case at the end of February. Now at this stage I was about 1.5 weeks from leaving Australia to go back to the Netherlands, and at this point nothing seems to be too amiss. It doesn't last long before you start to see the Netherlands and the UK becoming disastrous. So Australia's rising for a while there, and then it is no contest. The Netherlands and the UK are doing appallingly badly. Hang on a second. That interruption was a little domestic crisis with a broken water system, so that's being taken care of now. So I'll come back here and continue on the demo. So we've got to the 18th. Now that's the day that I actually left Netherlands for Thailand with my wife, who's Thai, so we could choose to live here. We actually arrived on the 19th. Hang on, that's going the right way, yep. And the Netherlands cases continue to explode. One day later, the Thais started to shut the border to foreigners. They then began their quarantine. So we managed to get in before foreigners were not allowed in. So I literally made it with 1 day to spare. And then the cases just continued rising. Now the axes automatically adjust on our plots, both Minsky and Ravel plots, unless you put a number in to hold it down. But you can see there's rather no point in doing that. The numbers are just exploding in the Netherlands and the UK at the same time. So we're talking now the beginning of April, and Australia and Thailand are obviously doing far, far better. China the best of all, though at this stage the number of cases per 1,000 in China is still higher than Thailand, but the Thailand cases are still rising. We're now up to the middle of April, okay, and then by that stage on, and if you dived in deeply and find here, you'd find that data point as well. The cases cross over, so China ends up being, from the country with the most cases, it becomes the country with the lowest number of cases per million sometime towards the end of April or beginning of February. So that's this is the information I was looking at in a very stylized and slow way through the database provided by the Johns Hopkins University, but it's a lot easier to do with Ravel. So I can take a look at the the time trend, which I'm doing up here. I can take cases per million, and then if I go to look at other variables as well, because the variable axes are locked on these two Ravels, when I change across to another position here, then I see the same on both cases. And what I want here is new cases per million. Okay, and now I can see that Thailand has just been way down below the others all the way through. You can see the peak for the Netherlands. There's actually been 5 peaks in the Netherlands. The first one, which is what got me to leave the country. The second one they managed to get on top of. The third they lost control of for a while. The fourth, they're now into their 5th wave of new cases per million. Now this is where sometimes labelling the graphs is not a good idea, so I'll just actually get rid of this sort of, I'll call this a selected variable up here, and the same down here. At some point we can make that a function of what you actually have selected as a variable, so when you change what's selected in a Ravel, you'll see the title of the chart change as well. But this is one reason that I'm very much data driven in how I think about social issues, climate issues as well. You've got to know your data. And when I look at how people struggle with spreadsheets to understand this sort of information, it's no wonder they go across to standardized dashboards. When you look at pivot tables, yes, you can do this sort of work in pivot tables, but my God, do you have to work hard. I don't know, I think by the time I'll finish giving this talk, somebody with the pivot table might have done something similar to what I've shown here. But you can do a lot more than I've shown with Ravel just at this point. You can do mathematics on it as well, and I'll show that in a later video.